Well, welcome. My name is Dolan. I'm an assistant professor in the political science department. This is
Andrea Vieux. I'm also an assistant professor here in political science.
And we're here today to talk to you about our graduate programs and how you might think about them, and encourage you to at least think about maybe applying for them. So, what kind of programs do we have? We have 3 programs in the department. They're right here on the board. The first one isn't exactly available to you at this time unless you already have a master's degree. The other 2 are the Master's in Political Science, and that's kind of our flagship entry-level graduate program. We also have a certificate program in Intelligence and National Security, and that can either be done on its own or in association with either the master's degree or the PhD in Security Studies. But you may be wondering, what exactly is it that we do when we do graduate study? So what do you think we do, Andrea?
A lot of reading and writing, learning how to interpret what we're seeing sort of in our own analysis and then interpret other people's analyses as well.
The way I think about graduate study is that it's a process of reading others' cutting-edge research and learning how to do it on your own. And that's really, so when you're actually in graduate classes, it's a lot of reading. But really, the big aim here is to teach you how to be competent researchers in your own right. So we talk about research. What do we mean? Research involves efforts to better understand the world by examining theory and evidence. So you'll learn facts about the world, sure, but more importantly, you'll learn about the kinds of explanations that people have offered for them in the past, and you'll learn how to make your own. And no less important, you'll learn how to test them by learning research methods. Now, we usually divide political science into 4 or 5 subfields. Some people, like me, study international relations. Andrea studies
American politics, public policy.
We have other members of the faculty who do other areas. So we have Kerstin, who does...
I do comparative politics, primarily Western Europe.
And similarly, Barbara does comparative politics.
Comparative politics,
Right.
political behavior.
Right. And Mike is also an international relations guy like me.
Yeah, like international relations.
Okay. When we study these different things, what are we actually doing? What are we trying to learn about? Well, it depends on the faculty member. So most of my work focuses on war and insurgencies. So I'm interested in explaining when wars happen, when wars change, and when wars end. Or if I'm working on a project on insurgency, maybe why do people join an insurgency? Why do they join one group as opposed to another? What role do they take? Well, why does the public sometimes, support an insurgency or oppose it? In American politics, what do people do?
We do a lot of things. What I do, I study pretty much youth political behavior. I study some of the K-12 education policy making. But you can think about American politics as people that study congressional processes and how laws are made, maybe studying bureaucracies and how laws are implemented. You can think about urban politics and some of the way that mayors and city council address some of these kind of growing concerns amongst the communities within kind of urban areas. So there's just a lot of different ways that you can think about American politics.
Yeah. We have other colleagues who study coups. When does the military decide to take over the government, and when does that succeed, and when does it fail, like it did in Turkey recently? We've got other colleagues who study strikes. When do workers go on strike, and how has that changed through time? Others look at questions about how does society, the character of society influence whether or not it's a warlike society or not. How do different judicial systems work? When do courts create new rights? And then we have other colleagues who work on things like the environment and environmental politics. So when does water become a contentious political issue? Why do some people try and fight for climate change policies to address climate change, and why do others oppose it?
Or how do states and localities adapt to climate change and sort of direct their resources to overcome perhaps emergency management issues kind of related to climate change?
Still others talk about public opinion.
Public opinion, why do people have different opinions on certain issues, or what are those opinions? We kind of look at public opinion over time and how those things have changed. For example, we kind of see kind of a growing difference within the marijuana legalization movement. Obviously, there's been a change on that issue. There have been some changes on obviously climate issues and things like that.
So we have a lot of people in the department. We actually have, more than 30 full-time faculty members of one sort or another. We all have our own research areas. And we all are investigating different questions, although we can group them into these broad categories. Looked at from a different perspective, we could say that we also have people who are experts in the politics of Turkey, the Middle East, American politics, African politics, East Asian politics, Latin America, Europe, and of course, I said American politics. I think we've got all the continents covered. Now you may be wondering, what do grad students actually do when they're in a graduate program? So
Well, I'll start there. I mean, I teach one of the first semester classes for our grad program, and it's basically a what kind of research methods do we use class. And so what we go over is, we talk about some of the things that some of the areas of interest that some of our faculty have. But the real question is, within those areas, how do people answer their questions? So perhaps I have a question of, what do young people even care about this election, right? And I need to go out and find some survey data, and what's the best way to analyze that data to answer my question. And so that's some of the stuff that we do in the more quantitative methods courses and some of the more qualitative methods courses. And then we have content courses that are going to give you more of a breadth of the different areas, such as American politics and international relations.
right. And so through these courses, you're learning several kinds of skills. So one thing that you will definitely do is, seminar after seminar, you'll learn how to read in a different way. You'll learn how to read in a much more critical, careful way. Others' research. A good graduate student, by the end of their time, should be able to tear almost any argument apart and then reassemble it so it's better. You'll learn statistical and analytical skills. So, who here's had scope and methods so far? Good, most all of you. Well, that's just the beginning of the kind of skills that you'll learn. And some of you might not be really excited about scope and methods at this point in your life, but the kinds of skills that we're teaching you, research design skills and the actual statistical skills, are terribly valuable skills.
Yeah, I want to kind of add to that. I think the scope and methods sort of kind of frightens people off from political science a little bit, and it shouldn't really frighten you from getting a graduate degree, because the way our method sequence is structured, you're going to get the tools that you need to be successful in the program. And those tools are the things that you're actually going to use out in the real world when you get a job. So for example, if I want to be a campaign analyst and I want to use my master's degree to work for a candidate, and maybe even go, when they get elected to office, work for them as one of their staffers, you're going to be looking at a lot of data and trying to interpret what that means for how to help that candidate succeed in the elections. You're going to be looking at a lot of public opinion data about how their constituents feel about different issues and what that means for the positions that they should take. So the quant methods, although it seems really like yikesy to a lot of people because perhaps of math and interpreting data and whatnot, that's actually what you're going to be using out in the field when you get the jobs with your master's degree. You're going to be using a lot of those quant skills.
And that's true kind of across the board. If you work in, if you work for a campaign, if you work in private industry, if you work for the government, if you think about it, we're creating so much more data today than ever before. Think about, you guys yourselves are creating data every day that someone is recording. That sounds kind of spooky. But think about your phones and all the things that are being captured by your phones, right? That's data that can be used to interpret it. A friend of mine who works for the CIA is the fastest hire I've ever heard of by the CIA. He's a guy who is an expert in these kind of quantitative methods.
They are really looking for quantitative methods. People right now, I can tell you that just from some of my own friends as well that are in defense.
So this is a generally useful skill. If you stick with politics as your career or not, this is a generally useful field. You'll also learn other kinds of skills. Like, I was talking with one of our grad students this morning about, she was one of our undergrads too, and about what she's learned. And she said that some of the things that she's become as a result of being a graduate student is a much better presenter of information to other people. She's been able to talk and make arguments much better. She said she's also a little bit more critical. But she talks about that as being a real strength too. She doesn't, she's more confident in understanding others' views and presenting different views. So these are some of the stuff that we might think of as the soft skills that you you get along the way. Right? Now, you might be wondering what people do with a master's degree in political science. That is to say, what can you do afterwards? And I think you can look at our prior students' career paths afterwards to get a good understanding of the kinds of opportunities that are available. So, some of my students have gone on to work for the FBI as FBI agents or FBI analysts. We've had students go and work for the UN as program managers. We've had people work for non-governmental organizations. People work in consulting fields. So a consultant is someone who is paid to give advice to either a government customer or a private customer about how to improve their strategies. Looks like.
I just want to throw out, if you see the alumni button up on our webpage, we actually have a lot of our former students profiled and what they do, undergraduate as well as graduate. So if you have an hour at some point over lunch, you want to read some people's stories, feel free to click on that and look at what people have done.
Certainly a lot of people in American politics, you'll see them out working either for state government agencies, they work for local government agencies as well. Like all throughout think tanks such as Pew Research Center, almost every fall I see them post an ad for they need a research analyst to analyze public opinion either as it pertains to religion or social media or whatever one of their subunits. So there's a lot of think tanks that are just constantly looking for people with the background knowledge of political science, but also the skills that they've gotten from their master's degree. Kind of, like you're saying, give advice or kind of just report what the findings are, the most recent surveys or something like that.
We also see people work in private industry who, private industries that interact with the government in one way. The government relations either with the American politics or in foreign countries. So there's a lot of different kinds of things that you can do with a master's degree.
And of course, this is beyond doing what we do, right?
Yes,
so
of course.
You could work, with a master's degree, community colleges, you could teach American politics or international relations at a community college level with a master's degree. So that's another option as well if you like teaching.
And you can also use it as a stepping stone to a PhD program, so you can actually work at a university like we do. In order to be a professor at a university, you have to have a PhD. That's why this would be sort of a stepping stone to that. Michael, you share what people need to know about if they're interested in applying for a program. If you can come up.
Sure. So if you're interested in joining the program, a number of questions you might have is how do you get in, what do you need to do. Assuming you want to apply for us, for instance, you need to generally have a higher than 3 GPA. However, what's good about applicants from our undergraduate program applying to our graduate program is we know you. We tend to have, we have faculty members that know you. So if you can get highly recommended would be to have somebody within our department write a letter of recommendation for you that's positive. And if you have a good letter of recommendation and some other good skills that we could see or good numbers, for instance, a fairly good GRE, we can, under certain circumstances, if your GPA is less than 3, manage to get you in. So you don't have to worry about it so much, thinking at this point, well, my GPA, for those of you who have a GPA less than 3, that you might have trouble getting in. Actually, we might be able to get you in. And there's a number of things that we can do. For one thing, we can consider only your last 60 credits. And because we understand that a lot of times when you first start as an undergraduate student, you don't really know what's going on. Oftentimes the first semester in particular, we mess up, we get a really bad GPA. I did that. I ended up with a 2 at the end of my first semester. And so we understand that. So what we can do is we can look at the last 60 credits, or if that doesn't work, we can look at what have you done in your major, because that makes a big difference. If maybe you have other classes you haven't done very well in other fields, but you've done really well in the political science courses, then that indicates that you have a real interest in what we do, and so that you probably will succeed in our courses because you like the subject matter. I mean, that's a really important thing that we consider. If a student likes a subject matter, they're going to probably be doing better.
Of course, if you have more than 3, that's great, and we would encourage you to have.
Yeah.
Better is better.
Right. Yeah, higher is better, obviously, but I want to make sure no one is discouraged if they're worried about that one. Now, in general, for graduate school, getting in, what you want to do for us, and if you apply elsewhere, is you want to make sure that when you are applying, that you, by that time, you have 3 professors from your undergraduate program that you feel will write good letters for you. You also want to do well on the GRE, the graduate, what does the R stand for? The graduate record exam.
Graduate readiness.
I'm
I
sorry?
think it's graduate readiness
It
exam.
used to be
Really?
graduate record
Changed.
exam.
Anyways, it's an exam.
We're making this up as we go
All
along.
right.
But you do need to take that exam. It would be like the SAT that you took for undergraduate. And so that's a requirement for getting in.
Actually, I've been told by a reliable source that it's very, very much exactly the same as an SAT. I find it hard to believe, but it's
Is that right?
true. That's what my son told me. He said, that was just the SAT. Okay. But it's the same idea.
And beyond that, what we look for is we look at your undergraduate record. And importantly, someone mentioned earlier, scope and methods. If you've done well in scope and methods, that's a good indication that you can do well in our program. And also if you have something that you can show that you write well, a writing composition course that you got an A in, or those things help you out for us, and also I think in general for applying to graduate school. So if you think about graduate school, those are things to prepare for. Once you get in our program, let's see if I forgot any. Yeah, once you get in our program, if you're interested in what you do, Andrea mentioned conduct of inquiry. That's a required course. There are 2 required courses, conduct of inquiry and quantitative methods that we already talked about. We try to have those in the fall. So if you start in the fall, you get those 2 core courses out of the way, and the idea is you're prepped well for the rest of your courses, because for many of us, that's the fun part, right? You can get into the content courses. If you're interested in war, you can take a course on the causes of war, for instance. But you take those 2 core courses in the fall, and then your requirement is you take 2 of 3 courses, either American, Comparative, or International Relations. And then you take 1 of 2 courses, either Political Theory or International Relations Theory. And so those are the core requirements. So that's a total of 2, 3, 4, 5 courses. And then, so your overall credit requirement for a master's degree is 33 credits. That's equivalent to 11 courses. So you take those core courses, hopefully in your first year, getting them out of the way. And then once those core courses are done, you're ready for the big hurdle, would be the comprehensive exam that you can take once the core courses are done. And the conduct of inquiry course that Andrea teaches and the quantitative course that we have prepare you for that exam, which essentially, a lot of it has already been talked about by Tom. It tests your skills on knowing what's going on, how to read an article and be critical of it, and be able to read a regression table. You'll get that from the quantitative course. And again, these are skills that really matter. So it's not like, well, this is standard, you teach this because this is what you do in a political science program. These are skills that really matter, that you take for life, that in many ways you'll be using in many of your classes in terms of many of your jobs in the future, in terms of the critical thinking, and for many of you actually using the statistics in order to analyze, depending on what jobs you go in. So, and then if all goes well, in your second year, you have a choice to make, whether you're going to do the thesis paper or a capstone paper. Now the thesis paper is an involved project. It requires a lot of self-motivation to really do it. It's a heavy research project. Probably most theses, to give an idea, most theses I think are between maybe 50, 120 pages, something like that, on average. So it's a pretty substantial work project. Now if you do the thesis, then you have a reduction of 2 courses that you, so of the 33 credit equivalent courses, only 27 of those credits need to be actual courses. Then, because there's 6 credits, you get a thesis credit. As you're working with a faculty member, so, at least one faculty member and also 2 others that will be committee members, and you visit a lot and you interact a lot and they advise you what to do and not to do. And it's a great learning experience, particularly if you're thinking of going on to, possibly going on to a PhD program later, because it really sets the stage for writing a dissertation later. So that's the thesis option. Now the other option is the capstone paper option. It's a much smaller product. And what you do there is you still take the 33 credit hours of classes, that's 11 classes, and the capstone paper can be a spin-off of a paper from one of the classes you've taken, or perhaps an independent study with one of the professors here. And you still have a committee, but it's a smaller committee. You have 1 professor and 1 other faculty member. You don't interact as much because what you're trying to accomplish is less. The rule is 8,000 words, so it's equivalent of an article, and so what you want to do in the paper is you can think of it as a really good undergraduate paper with a little bit of with a plus on that, in the sense that you do need to have some original thought and work in the paper. And so if you do now, the way the program is structured, if you do the capstone paper, you can in theory finish. Let's say you graduate as an undergraduate in the spring, you can in theory finish. You got the next year, you got the fall and the spring. If you take 2 courses in the summer, you can finish that following fall. So in a year and a half, you can complete with the capstone paper. With a thesis, that's probably unlikely, because the thesis project is so involved and it takes time to get into that your graduate degree would be a full 2 years probably for most people. Sometimes some people take a little bit longer. Occasionally someone might do it shorter, but this is what you would need to do in order to complete the master's degree here. Also, maybe I'll mention the certificate in intelligence. This is a professional degree, which is only 18 credits, I believe. 18. And I think it's not, so that's 9 courses.
Yes.
And is that right?
It's 18.
And you can get into, actually you can get the certificate in national security if you're interested in that professional degree, without actually even joining the MA program. But if you are in the MA program, you can do the certificate without taking any additional courses. You just take the courses that are required for the certificate. So this would be for those of you who might be interested in a career, professional career, national security. As an analyst, maybe the CIA or FBI or all kinds of security agencies. Actually, this might surprise some, but the Florida, is it the Patrol?
Florida Highway Patrol.
Florida Highway Patrol is very interested in the skills that we produce here within our program, either with the master's degree.
Section.
They have an intelligence section, that's right. Or their certificate that also, they've contacted us for that. So,
a couple other related things. So, first of all, when we talk about a master's thesis, you might be like, well, that just sounds like a long paper and how dreadful. But actually, most students enjoy doing their master's thesis. Yeah.
Yes, how many of you have heard or have done, or I think you were doing an honors in the major thesis? A couple? That is a really, really good introduction to master's thesis. So if you're enjoying that type of work, you have a great foundation for getting a graduate degree and writing a thesis. Just to throw that out. If you haven't thought about it and you're still in your junior year and you have time, you might want to check that out.
The thing about an honors in the master's thesis, but particularly a master's thesis for students in the program, is that it's actually a really exciting opportunity to ask the questions that you want to ask, try and find answers to them, and then test out your ideas. Right? That's fundamentally what you're doing. That's why it may be 50, 60, 70 pages long. Right? So in the past, for instance, I've had students who worked on questions about, when do terror groups decide to target civilians more or less, right? And they actually use data from the conflict in Iraq to test their theories. another student who used who also did a topic on terrorism. He used reports of attacks in Morocco and North Africa to test his theory. And so he got deeply immersed in this data and really became an expert in those kind of things. We've got another grad student. She's actually going to be coming visiting in a couple minutes, I hope. She's working right now on a project. She's developing a project that will explain what kind of targets terror groups select. What kind of thesis have you worked on? With students, not your own.
Yeah, thanks for that. A lot of the theses that I worked on center more on like political behavior and public opinion types of things, but some of them outside of the US. So in what ways do males and females differ on different political issues, or overtime studies, things like that. I do want to say, while we're talking about theses and these non-theses papers, one of the things that I think is the best way to think about how to approach a thesis is to find something that you're really interested in and try to find links to that in your coursework as you go through the program. So as you go from one class to the next class, you're not writing the same paper over again, but you're working on papers on similar topics, and all of that is helping you build toward the final product. And that's how we're seeing some of these students get out in 1.5 years or 2 years, because they've really thought about, they strategically planned, if you will, how they're actually going to approach the material in their courses to kind of streamline their process. And if that's something that, like, going into graduate school, what you want to study, and you already have a really big interest, try to pick courses that are in that interest and try to write papers for your courses that are in that interest and work toward the final product. The other thing that I do want to say about theses and these research papers is, a lot of times I see students get a little bit concerned when we say original research. And what is original research? And don't we already know all these things already? And what you'll find once you get into the literature is there's a lot of stuff we just don't know. Particularly because there's flaws in research, and you're starting to learn how to identify those flaws and how to apply those questions yourself with perhaps better methods or better data or something like that. So don't be frightened off by the idea of having to produce original research, because once you get into your area of interest, you're going to start finding some of these things that you want to know about that no one's ever asked before, and they just sort of pop out at you as you're reading an article. So I just wanted to sort of like,
yeah,
it's out there.
It is, well, and it's fun too. I mean, if someone said to me, would you be a professor if all of them was teaching all day? And for me, the answer is no. Like, the research is what makes the job fun, right? And I think that's probably my chair's.
I don't know, I think teaching is a lot of fun.
Teaching is a lot of fun too, but I don't dislike teaching, to be clear. But research is really fun, and it's interesting and exciting.
You get to learn things that you wouldn't necessarily learn about in class because you're answering your own questions. So that's the fun part for me. I get to think, okay, no one's addressed this particular issue within what do youth care about on these issues. So I go out and I find the answer that I'm looking for, like what's the answer about what you care about, and then I write a paper and I contribute to the scholarly community on that issue. So there are ways to you just have to find the things that you're interested in and really go at them.
You'll be surprised more by what we don't know than what we do claim that we know with a great deal of confidence.
Yeah, you learn also how to do it.
Right.
And the method. That's very important. Where to start.
And how terribly people have done it in the past.
Also about teaching and research, my colleagues were talking about, I think that it actually helps one another, because sometimes, as you're lecturing and your student, they start, especially undergraduate students, they have a tendency to ask a question which is really, different from the type of question our grad students they start asking us. Grad students, they start acting very much like us, they start having like a tunnel vision, focus on research, etc. But some of you guys ask very interesting questions, that we maybe haven't thought about it, and that become a subject for maybe a next, topic of research for us. And as we are also doing research, we have, of course, new material to teach you, So I think that that's kind of compromise between Tom's position and Kerstin's position in terms of research or teaching. I think goes hand in hand.
And so, can I just say a couple of things? So one of the things you might want to consider, maybe I'd really actually like to know more about why you're here or why you're interested in being ushered to the front. So please try this again. if you have a little bit of time, I'd like to know more about why you're actually interested in graduate studies in the first place, why you're here. I'd like to really know more about that, because we're always trying to figure out how we can make the program so it suits the needs of our students. So if you have time at the end, I would love to hear more about that. But something else you can try, if you're really not quite sure is this right for me or not, UCF has a senior scholars program where you can take up to 9 hours if you're qualified, and there are some restrictions and so forth of graduate credit. And I just have to say this in the interest of full disclosure, that comes with graduate tuition, and so you're going to have to work out some, as a financial aid person, how that would work. But if you're going in your last semester, stick your nose into a graduate seminar, because you're interested in graduate school, you can do that, and that will count towards completion of your undergraduate degree, but it will also count if you do get into the master's program for your master's degree, so you can sort of double dip in that sense. So again, that is something you might want to keep in mind and explore as you're thinking about pursuing a graduate degree without fully committing your life to this. We also have, want to let you know, most of our courses at the master's level are scheduled in the evenings. So if you do need to pay for your tuition and you also want to eat at the same time, so you need to keep a job during the day, it's possible to do that. We have some online options as well. And we do have a limited number of competitive graduate teaching assistant positions available as well, which would cover your tuition as well as a stipend for full-time students. So that is something you can apply for as well in your application to the program. So sorry for kind of
No. Well, that's the place I was going to head to next, actually.
Right.
As we understand, no. So the financing of graduate school, right? So some of you are probably like, I already have some student loans, I'm afraid. So it is true that there are tuition and fee expenses associated with an MA program most of the time. And Amanda can tell us what those are.
Sure.
Full-time was what?
So just so you guys are all aware, when they talk about credit hours, it's not like undergrad where 12 credit hours is full-time, graduate coursework is 9 credit hours. That's why when they say 2 years, you can't really smush 15 credit hours into one semester.
You'll die.
So grad, one course, so 3 credit hours is 1,000 this term, $1,108. So one full load, 9 courses, 9 hours. I'm sorry, $3,326. So just something to keep in mind. That would be per term if we were taking full time.
Does that include the fees?
Yes.
Right.
So.
And so you're not necessarily taking on the whole. You're not buying a house here. And as Kerstin said, we have GTA positions that are available for MA students on a competitive basis. You might be wondering, what is a GTA position or what is a GA position? What it is that they may well be the people who are grading some of your papers right now. Graduate students assist faculty members. A GTA is a graduate teaching assistant in usually grading, but sometimes also in helping students along with the material of their course. And so the GTAs are assigned to the members of our faculty to assist them with their teaching needs. So for instance, you might help grade online discussion posts, for instance. Sometimes I'll use them to grade one-page papers that I might assign in a class. And what happens when you have a GTA position is that really allows you to focus on your graduate studies on a reasonably full-time basis, because as she mentioned, it covers all of your tuition, and then there's also a stipend. The stipend is, it sort of pays some of your living expenses. You won't be rich.
If you plan ahead, kind of as you all in here in this room are probably doing right now, there are places where you can find fellowships or grants to help you. And if some of us kind of know about ones in our own areas, so if you know what you want to study and you're able to put together an application for a grant or fellowship, some of the faculty can help you find those fellowships for your targeted area of study or based on whatever the different fellowships offered are. So just keep that in mind as well. Is one thing that we didn't really touch on up to this point that I think is really important to say is get to know the faculty here. Oftentimes I see students semesters after I've had them saying, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? And I've never met them one time. Do you know what I'm saying? So You need to get to know the faculty that you have right now, because those are the people that are gonna help you achieve your goal of getting into graduate school and being successful. So kind of reach out to them and ask them for advice on where to find grants and fellowships, or even, you know, when they give you comments back on a paper, really think about those comments and go in and talk to them and say, how can I improve this paper? And maybe that will become a graduate, you know, the paper that you submit to graduate school as your writing sample. So kind of really think about how what you're doing right now as undergrads can kind of feed into preparing yourself to be successful in graduate school.
Let's think about some of the other things you could do to help prepare for graduate school now, right? So, you know, I was sort of interrogating one of our current graduate students this morning to say, what do you wish you'd done? What did you wish you'd done? One of the things she said was, well, when I'm in classes, not just trying to, you know, get a good grade, although still trying to get a good grade, but actually learn things, right? You know, actually integrate things so that they're available to you in the future. So that was one thing. We also talk about extracurricular activities at different schools, right? So are you in a club that, you know, is helping you figure out what your interests are and you know, what, you know, the things you need to be doing, right? So like we have the International Relations Club, Pi Sigma Alpha, organizations like that. I know
There's
about
a model UN club, isn't there?
yeah, I think there's, yeah. So we've got clubs like that that can be useful. Some students pursue internships. Those can be really helpful, useful things. Other students might work as volunteers on a campaign.
Right, and we were talking about that, go ahead.
We also have a lot of speakers actually and events that are public, and coming to those might also give you ideas about areas you're interested in if you don't know that already. So please take advantage of that, and Nick is usually the guy who sends you the emails, and I hope you open and read them all. We also post those on Facebook, and so those are really interesting opportunities too.
And then, you know, a really great way to get to know your faculty better and to try and figure out if something like graduate study might be the right thing for you is to look into undergraduate research opportunities. For some students, that might be honors in the major program. For other students, maybe because you're a senior now and you're like, I don't have 2 semesters, maybe you might talk to some faculty members that you've worked with and liked in the past and see if they'd be willing to do a single semester undergraduate research independent study. So there's things like that that you can do, even if you're now a senior and only have a semester left, that will help you figure out if this is what you want to do. It'll certainly help you get a much better recommendation letter, because we'll see you every week, and just you every week.
And you'll improve your writing sample. I mean, that's going back to kind of what do you need to get into graduate school. The writing sample is really very important because it tells the committee who you are as a, you know, as a researcher, and kind of like how you approach questions. So really being able to work through that. I think there's also those undergraduate research days here at UCF where you can present your research and faculty come around and comment on it. That's a really good way to kind of get feedback on some of the stuff that you're doing as well. Or through the undergraduate research journal and through that showcase. Yeah. Oh, that's right, the showcase. Thank you.
Showcase.
And then for experience, Florida Undergraduate Research Conference.
Oh, yeah, Florida
Yeah,
Undergraduate
we have
Research
had actually a
Conference.
number of students that they presented their paper at Florida Political Science Association conference. And by the way, the next one is April 1st, 2017, which is on a Saturday, so, you know.
April
So you
Fool's
get
Day.
April Fool's Day, exactly.
You know, and as you do these things, I think it's really important to take advantage of the opportunities to have, to develop a mentor-student relationship with a faculty member. As you do that, you know, make sure that there's someone who actually works in the areas that you're interested in. Not all, you know, I could not, if you were interested in Latin American judicial politics, I could not help you. But there's someone here who can. Bruce Wilson is an expert in that, right? So if you came to me and said, I want to do that, I'd send you to him. And you know, you also want to make sure that the faculty member has time to really devote to you. So I would, you know, like this, you know, faculty are only supposed to be mentors for 3 undergraduate honors projects at a time, for instance. So you know, make sure that you're, you know, finding people who are the right person to work with you and are able to really work with you in a way that helps you. Now, asked Taylor Haywood to come in. I asked Taylor Haywood to come in and talk to you for a couple reasons. First, she's a great graduate student. But second, because Taylor once was in your shoes. Taylor was an undergraduate at UCF. In fact, she was in some of my classes. And now she's in some of my classes again. So if you just share with us kind of your experience of her graduate program and sort of what you feel like you've gotten from it.
Okay, so basically I did my undergrad and I was trying to decide if I wanted to go straight into the workforce or if I wanted to go ahead and do my master's and knock it out, and I decided that trying the master's program here would be a good idea. So I decided that and had like a month to get everything together. I would not recommend that. Decide ahead of time. Let me see here. The writing sample, yes, as Dr. Vieux said, is very important. Your personal statement, even if your writing sample is very, very good, make sure you take time to go get help on your personal statement. You've never probably written one of those before, at least at the graduate level. So going into the writing center, even having one of the grad students there help you is really good. You see.
Or faculty members.
Yes, or faculty members.
We're happy to look at. Usually, the first thing I do when I get a first draft of a personal statement is scratch out the first and last paragraphs. So, sorry, don't be surprised now.
Let's see. What other things? The emails. When you get into this level of work, there is going to be conferences. There's going to be fellowships. There's going to be events here where speakers come, as everyone has talked about. And if you don't read every single email, you're going to miss one of those along the way, so I would recommend doing that. But if you like research at all, if you like school at all, I think you'd really enjoy this program. It's not a long one. You can do it in a year and a half if you want to do the non-thesis option for political science. If you want to do the thesis option, it's 2 years, sometimes a little more. It just depends on how long the thesis takes. That's basically it. Do I have any questions you want me to answer?
Can I ask a couple questions? What surprised you about graduate school?
Surprise me.
Good surprise, bad surprise. How about that?
Okay, the format of the classes. Very different from most of my undergrad classes. Most of my undergrad classes we went in, we had our structured quizzes, our structured tests, and there are still some of those in graduate school, but there's much more discussion. You're going to spend 2 hours and 50 minutes sitting there. You might have a little bit of lesson at first, but then you're going to debate. You're going to talk about what you read for the week. You're going to go back and forth. You can get pretty heated sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. That would be probably the biggest surprise to me. And there are actually pros and cons to that too, because when it comes to grading, a lot of your grading will be just papers or just your participation in discussions. So you really have to give it your all. You can't just memorize facts and go take a multiple choice test. That's not going to get you anywhere. So I like the discussion, but you got to remember that you've got to do your best at that. Any other questions?
Here, how about we wait a second, we'll finish up and then you can be part of it.
Sure.
Excellent. So, we're going to have a couple of finishing words from Kerstin if she wants, and then we'll just take questions that you might have, or not. Or I've just suddenly put her on the spot and she has nothing to say.
Yeah, I have no prepared finishing remarks, but I think we actually have a really good program. We're really proud of what our master students have done. Just recently, one of our students got a Best Paper Award for graduate students at the Florida Political Science Association. We give a lot of attention. Our program is relatively small, so all of our students get actually quite a lot of attention. I talked to somebody from George Washington the other day, and they have 80 students in their graduate classes, in the core required classes. We don't do that. Come prepared to class, and they'll generally be doing well. I think it's a lot of fun. But, like that. If you have any questions, Amanda is the program assistant, Mousseau is the credit coordinator, we're always here for you. Tell me more.
And I guess the last thing I'd say is, look into our program, find out what the faculty members here do, work on, or are interested in. But I'd also encourage you to look at other programs too. Make sure, I wouldn't want you to just look at our program and then come and decide it's the wrong place for you. I'd want you to look at other graduate programs as well and make the best choice. I think we have a good program, but certainly we want you to make it the best choice for you.
Can I say one more thing in terms of preparing, but also support? The American Political Science Association has actually a couple of scholarships and opportunities, particularly for minority students. There is the Ralph Bunche Institute for those of you who in your junior year. It's a bridge program between junior and senior year. It's 6 weeks, all expenses paid for, and a stipend at Duke University that one of our undergraduate students just finished, and she loved it. She thought it was fabulous. And there is also a minority graduate scholarship available, and that's on the APSA website. If you have any interest in that, let me know and I'll guide you to that. But again, there are support and fellowships and supports available if you're really interested in grad school. You just have to plan early. Junior year is a good time for a lot of those opportunities.
So, we'll take questions for a while. Yes, please.
Sorry. One other thing. How many of y'all have taken scopes and methods so far? Okay. That really matters. That was a very big surprise for several of us because we took it and then we forgot about it and then we got into graduate school. And that is what you're doing. You are doing that analysis in the lab. You are reading articles and interpreting the data and then debating that in the classroom. So if you've forgotten it, if you're going to come into grad school, get the book and relearn it before you get back in. Just trust me on that. The other thing in relation to fellowships is for the females in here, if you're going into security or defense, anything like that, there have been numerous new fellowships popping up for women who are wanting to go into defense or security, so look into that.
Okay, what questions are there? Yeah.
So I know in a lot of programs there's a really, really heavy focus on quantitative research for a lot of reasons, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I was really wondering what your guys, being in the graduate program and all these different capacities, what the balance is with quantitative research and qualitative research.
So, there's a couple ways of answering that.
Yes, there probably
So the first part of that is everyone has to take quantitative methods training. I think that that's really important. Now that said, when I teach a graduate course, and I teach a graduate course most semesters, usually probably about 60% of the articles that I assign students to read are quantitative. The remaining 40% are qualitative in some way or another, right? Now that said, what you might be thinking is qualitative methods and what I think is qualitative methods might be a little bit different because there's a lot more sophistication and rigor. And so if you want to do qualitative methods, you'll be trained in how to do them well. It's not just tell us a story, right? We certainly have people here who, if you look at my publications, most of them are qualitative methods kinds of publications. So we certainly have people who can do that for people who are interested.
I mean, I would just kind of add to that. It's a good question, and because I teach the conduct of inquiry class, which is kind of the first how to do research class that you'll get, we do cover qualitative methods in my class, and we talk about sort of content analysis and that kind of stuff. And I do have people write papers that are more qualitatively oriented research designs. I mean, I think of the theses that we see come through, or of the research papers that we see come through our program, we get a pretty good mix of both qualitative and quantitative. So there's not, within our faculty, there's a very diverse set of the ways that we all approach research, and so regardless of what kind of research you're interested in doing, there's going to be someone that you can find to work with on that. I mean, the quantitative is, as you know, is sort of taking off just outside of academia even more generally, so that's why there's such a focus on being able to understand those things and do those things, but we don't limit ourselves. So unlike some other political science programs, you're not going to be overly quant or overly qualitative, you're going to get a nice mix of both.
Yeah.
So why would one choose the thesis over the capstone project? What makes it more appealing, or vice versa?
So it depends, I think, on your interest and your goals, right? So if your goals are to go on as a researcher in some way, as opposed to, say, working for state government or something like that, it may be really valuable for you to have the experience of building a project from the ground up, in which you're gathering your own data and doing your own analysis, right? Whereas if you're mostly interested in kind of a policy-oriented job where you're not going to be expected to do that same kind of research, it may make sense in terms of time and so forth to do the Capstone project. So that's goals, time, those kind of things. Does that answer? And then, the other thing too is, some people just really wanted, you may not now, right? But at the end of your first year in graduate school, you may have something you just really want to do. And if you have something that you really want to do, you should do it. I think anyone would say, go for it, right?
I think there's another way to think about the non-thesis papers as well, which is if you already know what it means to put together a dissertation, sort of the amount of work involved in that, and you wanna go on to get a PhD, you can spend the time putting together a nice journal-length article to try to get published. So some of the students doing the thesis papers might be just submitting those to get their research out there to help them kind of keep pursuing kind of graduate school, if you will. But the answer is almost like it depends on who you ask.
I'd say that just happened, yes.
Yeah, it did.
There's a question, yes.
I'm actually a legal studies student,
Okay,
and like one of my
I
professors.
still like you.
Oh, thank you. And I'm like on the fence with law school and everything. And one of my professors, Eric,
Miriam,
yeah, I'm in law and society, and he told me that I should come here.
yeah.
But I'm a senior, so you guys are kind of making me nervous if I like have a shot. I haven't taken the class that she's talking about.
The scope and methods.
Yeah, like I have higher than a 3.0, but
Good.
I don't know. But I mean that's all I have going for me.
So,
So I don't know. Is it too late? Like just in your honest opinion.
It's not. And I'll tell you why. I didn't apply by the early deadline to graduate school when I applied for my master's program. Certainly that made me ineligible for funding in my first year because I didn't hit that deadline. But I was able to prove myself in the program. And then when I was going on to get my dissertation, I did get funding. So I actually waited until, let's see, I think the early deadline was January and the late deadline was April, and I probably decided sometime in March that's what I was gonna do. And
Well, I
it's not like I
graduate.
would recommend that.
I graduate in summer,
okay.
so that like should I
So
start
take the
coming in and
quantitative
like getting
methods
to know
classes.
professors?
So,
Is that-
my experience has been that we've accepted, we accept undergrads who majored outside of political science.
Mhm, we
Right.
certainly do.
One of my best students was Mark Wood, who was a psychology student as an undergrad. So
History majors.
there's no requirement that you major in political science.
Okay.
But you want to do this. You
Well, I
should-
want to be a teacher,
Okay.
and so once I told him that,
Yeah.
because like I'm a good like I don't know, like he
I
kind
mean,
of pulled
I
me
can
aside
also
and like
be a
talked
teacher.
to me, and I want to be a teacher, so he suggested this route
Yeah.
because of the PhD part.
So I would say, if you're thinking about it, going to the master's program, take a couple courses in spring and summer in the political science department. If you have free electives, certainly take the research methods class, take 2 or 3 other ones and see whether you actually like it before you.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly a master's degree in political science is,
Well, I want my PhD
Or
eventually.
PhD, yeah,
That's the thing.
like, people with law degrees do end up at times teaching in law schools, but they're probably the people that intern for like Supreme Court
That's
justice
what
or
you told
something,
me.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So that's what.
based on what you're stating is your career objective, I would say probably what you're hearing from Dr. Marion is correct about
To take classes
in political science,
and
right?
try it out, to do that like senior thing that you were saying where you can take classes.
Check undergraduate courses if you have credits left as well.
Well, I have 2 minors, so I'd exceed the 120. I don't mind paying the
No,
extra,
sure.
but like I would exceed it.
Talk to Nick about advising.
Oh, okay.
He will
The
talk
guy
to
in
you
blue
with
behind
your
you.
audit and
Yeah.
see
I just
your-
was wondering if it was like a long shot or like if I had a chance.
No, you certainly got a chance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Certainly got a
make an
chance.
appointment with Nick Shank and he'll look at your degree audit and figure out what.
Okay.
You just got an award for how great he is. honestly. So,
Yeah.
You mentioned composition in terms of kind of relating that to the route of the master's degree. Can you apply and or like compare with like other professors to see if you're kind of on the right track, like the current research papers that you're assigned to do in the advanced level courses of this department? Like in terms of like in-depth research papers of academic journals and like 15-page papers in general, can those basically be reviewed like as if you're kind of going the right track, if you're able to do like a thesis in the master's program, if you're able to kind of survive in the master's program basically?
I think one of the reasons why you see a lot of us saying like do the undergraduate research stuff is, so undergraduate research papers a lot of times tend to be the first half of the research paper that you would do in grad school. So it's the literature review portion. And that there's nothing wrong with that because that's a really good skill to be able to learn how to write a lit review and make an argument and set it up so that you can do the data analysis. But the part that's missing is the data analysis. So that's why when we say work with the faculty to kind of build those out, that's really what you want to focus on is like how are we gonna test your argument. So you'll have like half of it from a class paper.
Okay.
but it's a good example of like how you would approach looking through literature to find what people have done.
And you know, I wouldn't be necessarily too worried in that sense because we don't expect you to come in as a first semester graduate student and know everything already.
Also true.
Those of us who teach in the master's program work pretty hard at trying to get you to the point where you will be able to successfully do these kinds of things. We know that designing research in the way that we do is not something that you're taught as necessarily as an undergraduate, and so we start you off by doing by teaching you what you need to know.
And that gets back to the core that we kind of just talked about with the content, the conduct of inquiry and the quantitative methods classes. Those are actually there to teach you the skills that you need to succeed in your other classwork. So it's that's more of like, here's how you do what the process is, and then the content classes are kind of like, here's what we study in political science. So we've sort of set it up in a way that helps students succeed if they're obviously willing to put in the reading and the class discussion. But yeah, so I wouldn't worry too much about it now if it's not something you've done before, because just from my own experience, that's probably like 80% of the people that I have in a class in a first semester grad class. So you wouldn't be the one person in the room that didn't know, you know what I mean?
As someone who has absolutely no idea which career path I want to take at this point, or even really which area I want to specifically study, I've been told in the past that going to grad school without that knowledge can be more financially risky. Can you speak to that? Is there truth to that? And so I love learning, absolutely love learning, but not so sure what to do with that.
Well, oddly enough, I can also speak to this because I took what some might call a longer route, but it wasn't really in the scheme of how long it took me to get through the program. So I went into grad school as a master's student thinking I wanted to study comparative international relations. And anyone that knows me now knows that's not at all what I do, because round about my first or second semester of grad school, I had taken a public policy class, and then I took maybe an American politics class or something, and just really latched on to that research. And so just sort of immediately changed directions. And so it was like I went in there sort of like, I'm really interested in politics, but I don't really know what, and then I figured it out my first or second semester. But the classes that I did take still counted toward my degree. So it wasn't like I had wasted my time or money taking those other classes, because you still have to take classes in other fields anyway. And so it just fulfilled those elective requirements.
We can think about this a couple other ways too, right? So if you think about the skills that you get through a master's degree program, they're applicable in a wide range of careers, not just in terms of not just going on as an academic, but you can do other things. I mean, like I knew a bunch of people who I went to grad school with who ended up working doing like market research for an insurance company or a retailer, or one of them is now like the director of marketing at the Tampa Bay Airport. He just got a master's, he didn't finish his PhD program. So there's a lot of things you can do with the skills that we're talking about. Second thing is, a lot of times people think they have interest going into graduate school and then discover that they're different. And allowing yourself to do that